audio is coming through okay?
I hear you loud and clear.
Thank you.
Josh, if you can hear me, I'm having a note from Denise Hewitt. She's trying to gain access through the link on the meeting notice through her mobile phone, and she's having trouble with it. So what should she do?
She should. Let me see if I can send her the invite again.
Okay.
And Dara, I made you co-host. So I'm gonna have to step away here for a minute, but you're a co-host, so you can help keep everybody in line.
As long as you're ready for your presentation, Josh.
What'd you say?
As long as you're ready for your presentation.
Okay, she said she just got it, Josh. So let me see if she's able to get on.
Okay, perfect.
I'm on.
Oh, okay. Hi, Denise.
Hi. Yeah, I don't know. It said it didn't work, so I just kept trying. I was
Not a
determined to
problem.
make it work, Josh.
Sorry you're having trouble there.
Just goes with the rest of my day.
Okay. Denise, we're on standby for the next 2 minutes. It's at 3:59. 1 minute now. It's 3:59.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm assuming my mute works, right? You haven't heard me talking to my dog, right?
No, we did not hear you talk to Pippa.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Denise, I have the time of 4:01. Did you want to start?
Sorry, don't tell anybody I'm driving and playing with my phone. Yes, I would. I'd like to start. Obviously, I'm driving. I don't know who we have from the team online, but thank you for showing up today. I guess I'd like to call the meeting to order at I have 401 still. Can we go to the, I'm working without an agenda, Nancy. Can we go through our first action item? I believe that's the acceptance of minutes from last meeting.
Yes, we can go through that, and we have the agenda up just to let you know as well. So the approval that we have on here is both March 8th and 11th.
Okay, both meetings then. Has everyone had an opportunity to read through those minutes? Somebody needs to mute. You're bleeding into the meeting, please.
Funding, and then also highway planning and transportation. And so,
can someone mute? You're bleeding onto the meeting. Can we get a motion on the minutes, please? If we're ready to accept.
Vice Chairman, this is Dara. I don't think we have enough people for a quorum.
Okay, that's why I was asking. I can't see who's online.
We
okay.
currently
well,
have
then I guess we'll just,
Ralph
can you,
King.
I'm sorry, dear.
Sorry for interrupting. We currently have committee member Ralph King, Jennifer Sheffield, Jimmy Davis, and I believe that is all.
Okay. So let's just roll those, Dara, to the next agenda, please. To the next meeting for acceptance. And then Nancy, I'm working in the dark. Is the next item? Is the next item? I'm sorry. I'm trying to open a gate and drive a car and the whole crazy thing.
Not a problem. The next thing I show on the agenda. I don't even have a hand on the steering wheel. I'll just make a note here for you. I'll help you out here. The minutes we went ahead and pushed out to the next meeting whenever that's going to be scheduled for it. So we'll do approvals on both the March 8th and 11th meeting, unless you have two more attendees join this meeting. We can always go back to it. Next on the agenda. I'm sorry?
I don't think we will. I know Patrick is out, and I think Julie's out as well.
Okay.
So I don't think we'll have.
I'm on the call.
Oh, Julie's on the call.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Julie. Thank you, Ms. Ward. The next thing I show on here is the ordinances that you want to review, and I'll be happy to show you the presentation that I did back on February 22nd for the council under my utility billing quarterly update. Unless there's specific questions that we want to go to, I'll be happy to do either one or both.
I think you kick off your presentation, and we'll hold questions if we have any until the end, because maybe you'll answer them.
Yes, ma'am. Dora, would you go ahead and start the presentation up for me, please? Thank you so much. This is the presentation that was presented to council on February 22nd for the utility billing quarterly update. We're just going to scroll past the first things that come up is the different agenda items that were on here, but one of those was the consensus direction needed for council, which is the very last piece on here. So if we could, we'd like to scroll down to slide number 28, if I could, please. And this is the beginning of it right here. So we're just reviewing section 30 utility ordinances. It revealed housekeeping updates as well as new ordinances that need to reflect the changes in this department. Just to give you an idea, the housekeeping updates, I noticed that when I first came here back in April of last year, that the ordinances have not been updated for almost 10 years, and they did not match that of what is in the budget. So yeah, and so whenever you want to refer a customer to the ordinances, it was very difficult when you can imagine that they didn't match what was already passed every year in the budget when it came to charges, fees, and different aspects along those same lines. So just going through those, these are the housekeeping updates that had to go in, as well as some new changes that went in as well. Beginning with section 30-24 termination procedures. These are housekeeping updates, and what we did is we removed the terminated service and the certified mail as a method of delivery. Further on that, we noticed too that the information on this that provides people with the hearing to have regarding if their account has going to be terminated for non-payment. Please note that these customers are contacted 8 times before we go through with this procedure. That is 2 bills, 2 robocalls. Go back, please. Yeah, thank you. 2 bills, 2 robocalls. Don't go yet, Dara. Go back down. I'm not there yet. Thank you. Stay there. Customers get 2 bills, 2 robocalls to let them know that they're assessed late fees. Then they also get 2 delinquent notices. They also get 2 shut-off calls. And so you notice those are 8 times that we contact those individuals and do these things. And then what staff was doing is was sending out a letter to let them know that their services were going to be closed off and terminated. And many times, 9 times out of 10, if not 99% of the time, 99.9% of the time, those letters were being returned because many times customers have already been already left the property. So what we're looking to do now is to put that information regarding the hearing on the back of the delinquent notice, because there's a blank real estate back there, so we can provide that information. So that's something we're looking forward to getting done as well. Next thing is utility liens, which is section 30-25. This is just a housekeeping update as well, which is replacing the utility billing supervisor with the utility billing manager in all the appropriate locations. Next one, slide 30. These are changes in the charges required. If you look back on the old ordinances, they had all the old fees and old charges and a different rate structure. So it did not match that what should be on the utility portion of the billing, of the budget schedule. And so here is where we want to have that always match. Also here too, we added a section regarding the deposit where we can waive a customer's deposit if they have a good credit history with us when they're transferring to a new location. And then we also wanted to mitigate the risk on the opposite end of the spectrum of people who don't have a good payment history with the city to be able to have the ability to add or increase a deposit. And in addition, we want to make it clear that unpaid balances can be now forwarded to a collection agency or applied to the customer's active account. Slide 31. These were all mentioned in the budget schedule, but failed to be noted in the ordinances themselves. So here's processing fees were noted, as well as the after hours fees and the meter apparatus fee, which was also added. Next slide. Here's a housekeeping update as well, where we removed the dollar amount from the tapping charges, inspection, connection, and interceptor fees. This is so that it would match what is in the budget schedule, because we can update the budget schedule according to what the budget is from council, but that means that we would have to go back and update that in the ordinance itself. So here we just indicate that the fees themselves will be indicated in the budget schedule that they can go to. Listed in the schedule, but you had to add it to the ordinance, was the same day new service connection, as well as the temporary connection and disconnection fees. Temporary service fire hydrant construction meter, that was also not listed in the ordinances, so we went ahead and want to go ahead and input that information here, as well as the temporary water service availability, and give the information that's here as well. Next one. Definition of charges. Here's where we wanted to add the irrigation as a defined system for a sole function of watering landscape. It was not located in the ordinances as well. So here's where we want to add that. As well as we removed all the water and sewer rates under the definition of charges, so we could because that information is already filed with the city secretary's office in the budget itself. We also added the new winter quarterly average and seasonal sewer average clause in there. And also the information for customers without a meter where water shall be charged a default of billing amount listed in the budget but not in the ordinance, as well as the sewer use credit voluntary program. This is where a change was made due to the processes that we did changes here in this office. In the past, it was a hard stop on the 14th day. We wanted to make that more of a flexible timeline. So we made that within 20 business days of the bill date. We removed the older clause, removed the clause extension for account holders of age 60 or more, because we do have payment plans in place and have the ability to do that. And also put in there too, where the plan was not adhered to, what needs to be done after that as well. Next one. We removed the confused language that was under late fees. If you looked at the old language, it was interesting because it said that when you got a discount for early payment, you don't get a discount for early payment. What it was is that when you paid your bill on time, you didn't get a late fee. So we updated the ordinance to state just that you will continue to get a late fee when we required to pay the gross amount of the bill calculated at 110%. So we indicated that now. Here's another update we've done in the system regarding the new processes we're doing. Update the timeline within 20 business from within 20 days to within 15 days of the delinquent notice to match that of the delinquent notice. And we made that so it's a tighter timeline to meet the billing deadlines that we do have. To comply with section 3024, we had that information also matching. The reconnection after disconnection, this is a housekeeping update. We're just updating the appropriate term from reconnection fee to a processing fee and added the applicable additional deposit. And to mitigate the risk, we also indicated here too that the additional deposits were added to reconnected fees when the account has been disconnected for non-payment twice within 6 months. Testing of meters has also been updated to indicate reflect the new testing standards of the American Water Works Association, and as well as the bankruptcy notice, so we can indicate what the procedural changes are on that, where you have to close the account, open up new accounts with a new deposit, and then based on either the reorganization or if they the account has their amount discharged, those accounts would then be written off by council. And that's all we have on the ordinances. Again, that's our goals, that we're always looking to rebuild the trust with our customers. And we're providing those transparency tools of what we're doing with the meter profiles, as well as the AMI system and the customer portal, which is forthcoming, and go from there. Thank you, Dora.
Ms. Massey, I got a question on the presentation. Dora, could you go back to, I think it's the next to last slide. I think it's section 30-46. Testing of meters update to reflect the new testing standards, along with procedural standards. Are you aware, is there anywhere in any of the adopted budgets where the residents' right to view the test has been removed? Has that already been removed and adopted by council and we just don't recognize it?
One moment, I'll take a look at that for you.
Okay. The reason I ask, and I know it was discussed at the first meeting in March, I brought up the issue about being able to observe the test. And I know staff said, well, we're not sure about, a tester allowing public access to their facility. But I do understand we use Southern Flow Meter, and Southern Flow Meter has a mobile lab. It's equipment on a trailer, and he pulls around town and he's working in parts of town. When there's a meter to be tested, he hooks up to a fire hydrant. So I'm trying to understand, there's not a access to his property insurance concern. So I'm not sure. There's not like
Mr.
he could
Davis.
deny the access, I don't think, because it's happening on a city street that we own.
Well, let's go back into something else too. I understand that the way that they do this, the testing on itself, when we were reviewing the testing procedures they were doing, Mr. Davis, with our Badger meter people and the engineers, and all their pictures that were showing us, they said proprietary on it. So I would say that that if they wanted us to view something like that, it would be a proprietary process that they were doing. So that I would have to take up with that of the legal department to see if that's something that can or cannot be done based on those and any kind of other concerns I would have as well.
Okay.
And to answer the first part of your question, Mr. Davis, and the budget document hasn't been changed. I don't know that the budget document had that language in there that you were asking about to begin with. Usually it's just a fee structure that's adopted that
Yeah.
has kind of the amounts.
Yeah.
But we haven't changed the adopted budget, and we haven't gotten to the point of creating the budget for next year just yet. We're working on it, but we don't have that document yet, so nothing's changed there.
Yeah, no, yeah, I was just wanting to make sure somewhere along the way, because as she pointed out, we do updates on budgets and language changes, and they're doing housekeeping, because if you go today to the Muni Code site to section 30-46, it says residents have the right. And I know in January, there's a resident that wanted to observe a test, and he was given, here's a pinpoint, here's where we're going to be. You can come observe the test. So the vendor said he could observe it. So I think that might, I think that would challenge the proprietary, you can't see my equipment. And I guess we could even ask the city attorney. I mean, if someone's flow meter is saying, I don't want you to see my equipment or see my test, then what says we can't ask others and say this needs to be one of the requirements? And I guess even within the scope of the RFP that they responded to, was it listed as a requirement in the RFP? So maybe providing the RFP would be helpful. Just understand, if we said this is a requirement and they submitted a bid, they can't come back later and say no. If that was
One even better.
Yes, ma'am.
I agree. I was going to say, Mr. Davis, I'm in agreement with you on that. But my concern too is that if the process itself is something that's proprietary, that's up to the company itself. And if they meet the requirements of what we're looking at, I would think so. If you had a process you do and it meets the standards of what the guidelines that you have, but yet there is a proprietary process that you use, for what you do, that might be something that you want to keep as that proprietary process.
Couldn't you develop an NDA for that purpose?
I don't know. That's something I'd like to look at with the city attorneys on that and ask that question. But I can say that on the new ordinances, that it's not in there as well, that they can look at it. But we did set up a process for that individual that Mr. Davis is speaking of to go out there and view the testing itself. Now, what they're testing and what they're viewing may be something different in the sense of they're looking at that meter and watching how it's viewed and so forth. So maybe the proprietary pictures were just that. They were just proprietary pictures. Maybe the process is something that they can view on it.
All right.
So,
because as we go today to 30-46 on the city municipal code site, they can watch it. So it is there. And I'd bring up part of the information y'all shared that I found really helpful this weekend was some meter testing documentation. And it was really insightful that in December, we took 4 brand new meters, 3 5/8 and a 1-inch, certified from Badger, sent it to Southern Flow Meter, and it tested well below limits. And y'all said, this don't make sense. They calibrated their equipment, and what do you know? Every flow rate tested significantly higher. So to say you can't watch it, considering their equipment wasn't calibrated right, we don't know when it was. And I've asked for those calibration records for the last 3 years because I want to see, as well as what's the industry standard. How often are they supposed to calibrate it? I assume AWWA has some recommendations, but what we know is it wasn't. And when they calibrated their equipment, it tested fine. And if they're telling us we don't want anybody to come see our test, maybe that's why. So I think that's all the more reason we need to reconsider and look at other options. And so the RFP that we submitted just to see if that was a requirement, what the AWWA standards are for how often they're supposed to be calibrated and certified, and their calibration and certification records for the last 3 years, I think is really important to understand. I mean, this is the company that we're banking when a customer says my meter's wrong. The city is banking on their accuracy, and we know on December 10th, they weren't accurate, not even close.
Excuse me. I apologize. Mr. Davis, I agree with you. That's something that I would, if we're banking it, like you said, I would feel the same way. Again, they're proprietary pictures. It may not have been a proprietary process. It's something that I like to look into myself and do it. Being a mobile unit like that, that's something that would be convenient, because you can imagine that there's also, large meters that you can't pull out of the ground. So you want to be able to test those at the location themselves. You're looking at 3-inch and larger. So that's another thing that we should look at as well. So that is the reason I would think that you have that mobile capability on that. So that's something that I'll be happy to look into for us and get back to us on that.
Okay.
To see and do that. Now, regarding the art, okay, I was sorry, just go right ahead, Mr. Davis.
Well, one last question. Is there anything when staff's looking for AWWA standards, are there different calibration recommendations if the equipment's supposed to be in a building, set up on a bench, there's no moving, it's stationary? Does that need to be calibrated less than equipment on a trailer pulling over the bumpy roads of Houston? And how could that affect calibration that maybe it needs to happen at each testing?
Or is it something that
That
they
would
do
be interesting to know.
calibrate, or they do calibrate every time before they start, that they test their equipment? They test their equipment on a standard mag meter and make sure that it is the correct calibration for it, and then they're able to start doing the rest of their testing procedures in all their testing equipment. So that might be what their process is. The question would actually be then is what is their process when it comes to ensuring that the calibration is there? So that's something that we can look at as well. But in regards to the ordinances itself, can we go back to that? And what my asking is there any other questions that you all have on that?
I'd like to make sure we've clarified that we've got a couple, maybe 3 action items. Nancy, one was that you're going to do a follow-up on whether this is the process or the pictures were proprietary. If the process isn't, then that may give access to customers. If it is, you were going to check with legal if NDA or some disclosure document can be developed, and if that would be enough coverage and agreeable with the vendor. And I'm sorry, there was a third one.
And also you want to see what their
calibration.
Calibration, yes, ma'am.
Right. Are you taking that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right.
Hey,
thank you.
Denise, just make sure the calibration is 2-part. Their calibration records for I'd like to say last 3 years, but also AWWA standards on how often calibration should happen.
So AWWA standards on calibration.
Well, do they fall under Texas weight and measures or anything? I know when you have scales or calibrations of certain things where you deal with the public, that there's some calibration requirements, right?
There would be, I know I've seen that with the gas stations and so forth, whether or not for meters for testing water meters, that's something else, but I'll see if they have to go with MD, what is it, MDA?
I don't know what it's called.
State reg, state reg.
Weights and measures. I know scales. I know where I worked before, there were certain type of testing things that you had to follow specific ruling around.
Okay. So I have those 3 action items.
Thank you. Aren't you glad you came to the meeting tonight? I know that these ordinances are supposed to go up for the second read at council on the 22nd. Given that section 30-46, we have some outstanding questions around. We would like to know the protocol for having a hold on this second read.
That's a question I would have to take up with someone else and see if there is a hold that we could put on it or push it out to another date on it.
Mayor, are you online?
I'll look into it right now for you, Denise.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So this is a hold item right now, as far as the committee's concerned, until we hear different. Is that a fair statement, Nancy?
That's what I understand it. So the question is that, let me ask this question to the committee. What is the additional, what's the additional verbiage that you're asking for it to be on here? Because
I think it's around all of the, can we go back down? I think Dara's running this. Can we go back down to that slide, please?
actually, if we bring up let me bring up the clean format on there so you can actually see the ordinance that I'm looking at.
Okay,
Dara, if
great.
you go to, that would probably better. That way you can kind of see it. Dara, let me send, actually, if you go to March 1st on the city council meetings, let her go there first. And under that, you'll see
I was
under,
thinking, if you have it up, do you want her just to share?
I wish I could. Let's see if I can. Bear with me. Let's see if I can bring it up real quick. Nope. One second. Let me go ahead and go to another location. Share. Okay. Give me a moment. Let me just see if I can bring it up this way. I'm working off of two different systems. I have both my laptop and my desktop. So I got to move one thing to I got to move something to my laptop. There it is. All right, give me a moment. Let me just bring this up. It's 3046. Because the question is going to be is what verbiage are we looking to add in here or take out or go from that direction?
I think that depends on what we find, right?
Right. That's what, so I'm going to show you this thing. Here's the clean version that's being presented to council. It was voted on council by 3-1. And let me bring this here. Okay, Dara has it up already. Dara, if you want to, let me share my screen real quick. I have it up already.
Okay, go ahead.
I got it. So do y'all see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
I do.
Okay.
Yes, Nancy.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank y'all. So it tells you here that the customer may request through water billing the accuracy testing and go from there.
Well, maybe not, Nancy. All I see is your directory.
Oh,
Documents.
so it's, you don't see the ordinance 220-12, section 30-6, testing of meters?
No, you've just selected the file. I see your share
Yeah, we
file.
just see your directory.
Yeah.
Okay, bear with me for a second. Let me go into share again.
Nancy, can you see my screen? Is it the third option that states utility ordinance chapters 1 and 2 clean?
Yeah, but I actually,
I'm seeing your directory, Nancy.
okay, no, okay, so thank you. Let me go ahead and I'll stop sharing. Dara, go to under that one, go to clean format. Go to utility ordinance chapter 1-2 clean. And for all y'all, that just means a clean format. Then go down to section 30-46. And there it is. So can you all see that there?
We
Can
enlarge
you make it a
it.
little bit, can you
Yes,
enlarge it a
ma'am.
little bit, Dara? My eyesight's not as good as it used to be. Perfect. All right, so in here is we put in the fact of the plus or minus 1.5% of 100. And the information is not in there where they can view it.
Yeah.
That was what was taken out.
Yeah. And that's really that was my first concern. But then when y'all shared the memo that was sent about all the different test results, and when I saw those new meter results, that raised more questions. My thought personally, everything I've seen, I have no concern whatsoever with, except this one section.
Okay.
That's just, everything else makes total sense. Putting the fee for testing the meter in a fee schedule makes sense, nice and easy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mr. Davis, if I could ask, what is it what information are you looking for in here so I can address that with legal? And so then the question of being pushed out to past March 22nd. So that's what I'm asking. So I know that my 3 action items is proprietary pictures or a process so it could be viewed. And so is that one, the calibration records,
The regarding this specific language, it's the fact that the residents are losing the right to observe the test.
okay.
The other questions I have are about how meters are tested, because this is what we say, and it's based on AWWA standards, and AWWA standards say you have to have them regularly calibrated and certified. Because I've read the addendum M6, it's in there. So understanding what they require, because we're saying they're going to do this, let's just make sure the vendor is. But from a resident perspective, it's the right to be able to make sure that that the test is right. I mean, I've seen people.
Hey,
Sorry,
Nancy, real quick, and I apologize for popping in and out. I've got 3 meetings going on at one time. Just part of it. And I'm certainly okay with holding the second reading of the ordinance. What I would like to see, Nancy, maybe with some of what's being contemplated and talked about here, certainly I think people need to be able to see their meter being tested, those types of things, and certainly want the UB Citizens Group to have some comments on this ordinance. I'm wondering if we can't put some of what's being said in writing to maybe Darren to look at the actual ordinance itself, and then just hold this until the first meeting in April. Certainly it needs to go to the council has to concur with it, of course, but maybe we do that. We've waited this many months. I don't think waiting a few more weeks is going to hurt anything.
Can do. I'll go ahead and I'll get with legal on this to get the information and
Okay.
And see, go back and ask to put the view back in there before, but I'll check with the testing company first to go from that point.
Okay.
And then
I
we'll go
think
to
it's
legal
certainly
and go from that
appropriate.
direction.
Yeah, I think it's certainly appropriate for this group to weigh in. It's one of the reasons why we had sent it out before, and I know lots of emails, lots of stuff going out, but I'd rather get their input now than us pass the second reading and us decide to go back in and change it.
Yes, sir.
So, yeah,
yes, sir.
Absolutely.
All right, I'll have that on. I'll task that this week to get it done and then get with legal and find out what our procedure will have to be from that change forward. And then I'll get back with ad hoc and everyone here
Okay.
so they can let them know what the status is.
Okay, I'm going to step back out, but I'll be back on. Are we doing the arrearage presentation here in a little bit?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll be right back in.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ms. Hewitt, just to repeat, I'm going to go ahead and as per the mayor, I'll go and what Mr. Davis and what the committee is looking for is the, let me check with the company that does it first. And go through the process to see if it can be viewed, if it's not, or if it can be viewed and put that back into, and see if we can put, and how that language can be, put it back into the ordinance itself and go that direction so we can at least go forward on that. And then the next step would be to, if it does meet, and I'll go ahead and get back with you all to know what the new language would be on that. And then after that, it would have to go back to council for a first time reading of the change on that based on the recommendation by the ad hoc committee. And then if it does pass, then it'll be back into, it'll be an update, clean version back into as a second reading for all the ordinances. And go
Okay,
from
and
there.
then you're going to do following up on the testing certification.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, so, yeah, the calibration records in the last 3 years, as well as AWW standards for calibration of that, of their equipment. And see if it meets the state, and see if they have to meet state regulations when it comes to scales and testing of their testing equipment.
Yeah, weights and measures.
Weights and measures. Okay.
Any other questions on this, on the ordinances? Hearing none, can we move to the next agenda item?
Next agenda item you had down, Ms. Hewitt, was to go over the arrearage presentation that was going to be presented now by Mr. Eric Roach, our budget officer.
I just want to confirm, Roth, tell us, Seth and Josh, am I correct?
Yes, ma'am. It'll be Seth Garrison and Josh Rosh. Gentlemen, are you both on the line?
We are. Josh is here.
We hear Seth is here too.
Okay, please feel free to help guide us through this if you don't mind. You have as much or more knowledge probably more knowledge than what the committee has, and so we'll look for you to help walk through this if you don't mind.
Yes, of course.
All right, well, Eric, we'll turn it over to you now.
Hi, everyone. So it's good to be back in front of the committee. I spoke to you at least a few weeks ago, if not a month or two ago, around some data. And this time we're back answering some more questions we've been asked to bring forward the numbers on. We're going to spend a little time today going over the calculations, just because while they're not complicated, there are several steps to how we got there. And I want everyone to feel comfortable knowing how we generated this number. That's almost as important as the number itself. So first, we'll review the 3230 plan real quick and talk about its budget implications. Then we'll go through that methodology and get to the total arrearage amount. And by the way, when we say arrearage, we're really talking about that total unbilled amount. That's really kind of the correct way to phrase it. It's just my kind of bad habit of calling it arrearage, but it's unbilled amount, which is a much more straightforward term. Well, then I tried to anticipate some questions that might be asked and went ahead and answered those ahead of time. And then we'll talk about next steps and I can answer questions. The only thing I ask is this is kind of complicated and has a certain flow to it. So just to keep everyone on the same page, if we can hold some of the questions, especially around the methodology, until we at least get to the part where we're comparing kind of Raftalis's numbers to the city numbers, that would just help me tell the story. But if I say anything that's confusing, please do step in and let me know and we can get that clarified. But it would just be easier and clearer if I can kind of get through the first chunk of the presentation.
So Eric, this is Steve here. And I'm
Yes,
sorry,
sir.
but I'm a little knocked off track already because it's been my understanding that there are two components of unbilled revenue. One being what I would traditionally call work in progress or traditionally unbilled, with time to invoice, so to speak, somewhere between 7 and 15 days. And the second component is what is called the arrearage. So right out of the gate, I want to make sure that I understand the definition of arrearage relative to unbilled revenue, because I don't believe they're one and the same.
Yeah, and that's why that's on me. I need to fix my language. So I appreciate you saying that. And if Raftelis wants to chime in, I'm happy to have them discuss the difference as well. What we're talking about today, and I can go through and change this in the presentation, is where it says arrearage. I'm talking about the portion that the city is behind on collecting. So if we took the unbilled, everything that's unbilled, and just said, let's bill it today, that's what my number is. Just because that was the most simple, straightforward way, I think, to present it. And there's always kind of calls to be made on how to look at this number. But I wanted to at least start there. Does that clarify it?
It does, and thank you.
Yes. Okay. So just a reminder, the issue that the city's trying to solve and that you are helping us with is really that gap in days between when we read the meter and when we bill people. So I think sometimes we get confused. Is the 3230 plan the problem, or is the billing gap the problem? And it's the gap is the issue, and the staff often refer to the 3230 problem or plan as the solution that council has chosen. So what it does, right, is every time we bill you, we get a little bit closer to catching up on how far in arrears we are, how far that window is back between the number of days between we read your meter and we billed you. So every month we make a little bit of progress, and this is what council has asked staff to do. When we look back at cycle 11, we had sort of a peak arrearage or unbilled amount go out at 70. We were at 71 days. And cycle 11 was actually 3 bills in arrears. So from there, we now look at cycle 11, and cycle 11 is down to 2 bills in arrears. We also have started putting this information on the website because it's become so important, obviously. And you can see that not all cycles are the same, right? If you look at the left-hand portion of the screen, you can see that cycle 14 down here actually started at 78 days out, where the rest started at 71. Now they're around 57 days. So that represents the progress we've made. And we have a target of getting to 15 days between when we read your bill and when we send it out. What that 15 days should be is kind of a separate discussion. But I think the answer is we want to be better than 57 for sure. And our target's 57 or 15. And whether AWWA has a recommendation or not, or best practice, as we get better information, we'll be able to kind of fine tune, but we think it's going to be around that 15-day figure. On the right side of this page, you can see kind of some milestones that we expect to hit if we stick to the 3230 plan as it's written, which is what we plan to do. We just passed that all cycles are going to be within 64 days. We're coming up on cycle 12, next year, about a year from now, cycle 12 will be within 1 bill. In 2022, all cycles will be within 1 bill. And then about 2 years from now, all cycles will reach that 15 days or less. It's a very gradual step down. And I like these charts on the dashboard because they kind of show how this built up over time by each cycle, and then how it's just steadily going to decline at those 2 days at a time. So that covers the 3230 plan, right? And now let's talk about that total unbilled amount. So I'll walk you through how I did this, and how staff did this. I'm sorry it's kind of tedious, but I know we'd be asked about it if we just glossed over it. So the first thing we did is, where do we get our data from, right? Well, we get data from the automated meter reading system as we drive by, and we took those from December, January, and February to build those 37,000 accounts that we have. And then we identified each account type as well. So, Mr. Davis, you had asked us in a previous presentation to include which cycles and which dates we're reading from and what we're talking about. So this slide is for you, Mr. Davis. Next, whenever we're working with data, we want to look at outliers and understand what's causing them and come up with a proper way to treat them so we can come up with an accurate number. In this case, first we looked at sort of if there's any negative consumption bills, right? This can happen if a read is missing a digit, if a previous month read had an extra digit error. If there's just really kind of any error, sometimes you get these negative amounts. The data can kind of look, this is what it looks like in the data to us, right? Is you have your latest build read and your build consumption, and then over here you have 28, and they stick out like sore thumbs when this happens. So we identified 141 out of the nearly 78,000 bills. So we're talking a small fraction of a percent here. That's well within, you know, Lean Six Sigma standards for being accurate. Of those 141 had a negative consumption figure. Remember that we're not talking about bills that have been sent out yet, right? These are bills that are kind of in the process and are waiting in queue to be sent out because we have that gap in billing days.
Yeah, can I ask a question? Just quick.
Yes, sir.
What's the root cause for the negative consumption figures? Has that been determined?
Ms. Massey, do you want to chime in on the 0.18%?
Yeah, Mr. King, when you have a negative reading, it's not from a drive-by, but it was from a manual reading that would have gone out. And so what staff does is this is, if they didn't get a reading, we would send someone out to go get a reading for us. And if that reading came back to us as a negative reading, or not a negative reading, but it was missing a digit, or it was misread by a fat fingers or whatever the case is, then staff sends it back out again to validate it. In this case, what we did here is that they just went ahead and took that we took that information and we just, we based it off of the previous billing amount for this in these cases.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. King. So anyone that had a negative usage, we needed to come up with a way to treat it for this analysis. So what we did is we essentially took the previous month's build usage, the most recent build usage, as long as that was good. That captures seasonality. It's nice and simple and easy to understand. I wrote a paragraph about data interpolation for people who are into that, but I'm not going to read it to you because most people are normal and happy and don't want to talk about data interpolation.
Mr. Roach, so just
Yes,
to
sir.
make sure I understand basic question, following off from Mr. King's question. So for a negative consumption, they're saying that we got a meter read. The previous read was 100,000. The new read was 99,000. Y'all said, yeah, it doesn't look right. Go back and reread it. They go and say, oh, this is what it is. So what y'all did is y'all looked at prior month's consumption, and if the average was 5,000, you put the ending meter read as 105,000 and billed them for the 5,000, correct?
So remember, we're handling items that haven't been entered into the billing system yet. So they haven't made it. We're handling the raw reads at this point because we're trying to figure out those bills that haven't gone out yet. As these get actually processed by the utility billing staff, that's when they would enter the normal queue of being flagged and go out for a better read or be adjusted and do whatever need to do. What I'm talking about is we needed a way to calculate and handle these 141 accounts. We knew that out of this, nearly 78,000 accounts, it probably wouldn't be a huge influence on the total amount, but we needed a way to handle them that was standard, and just using the previous month's total amount. Hey, they used 300 gallons last month. Let's say they used 300 gallons this month was probably a pretty good way to go. So that's what we did.
Yeah, got it.
But
So,
we didn't adjust anyone's bill. No one's being charged based off this analysis.
right. You're just, this is the dot over the I, literally. We got it.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So other side of it, right? High outliers. We had 23 accounts. These stick out even more because you see things like, hey, they're using 500 gallons in November, and then they read 999,000. We had 23 of those. It's even a smaller number. We would normally catch these, right, because before the bills get sent out because they're so obvious. In this case, these were handled or caused by meter changeouts, which is just kind of a standard thing that happens and we handle in the background. So what we did is we worked through all those, and we give a little bit of analysis. We worked through until we didn't see any more. This was kind of a manual process for us. And, you know, staff will continue to monitor for these sorts of things before bills go out, of course.
So real quick to make sure I understand. So November had a read of 44, and that's hundreds of gallons, so it's 4,400. December, we get a higher read. Turns out we put a new meter in that we changed meters. That meter didn't start at 0. We're
Miss
putting
Manson?
in a used meter.
Yeah, let me go ahead and the meters will start at 0, but if there's going to be a time too, they honestly, if there's a very low water pressure, or not low water usage, that usage of 0 can roll to a negative and then back to a positive, as you guys seen that. So if that rolled and they took a reading and the reading was at 9999, we know that that's part of, if you remember mechanical meters, that's a rollover. So we know that that needs to go back, and we start that one at 0 then as the previous reading for that customer is what we do.
Okay, so these are all mechanical. None of these were the new ultrasonic.
No, these were the meters that were being changed out. And so they can have readings of, you know, go back and forth on those type of readings. Because you got to remember, being a flow tube, it can roll back and forth on that reading. So as small as that is.
Okay, so I misunderstood Mr. Roach. The December reads not because we put a new meter in. It's not.
No, it is a new meter. It is a new meter that is put in. Yeah. So, you know, for example, Mr. Davis, if we put a new meter in at your location and you're gone and you're overseas in the Fiji Islands for the next 6 months, you know, your usage may go back and forth between 0 and 99999.8 or something. But we go out there and read it, and it reads at 99999.8. We know that we don't want to bill you from that over to the last reading of your previous reading of 500. So we know that we need to go back and we look at those and they stick out. Yeah. So it'd be a 0.
Understand. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yep. So staff viewed each of these every time it came up. We looked at the bill consumption and applicable work orders and sort of, hand work those to an appropriate reading for this analysis. Again, we're talking about a very small amount, so it's not going to affect that total number. I just wanted to be clear that we did look at this.
What's the threshold, Eric,
for
your outliers?
So in this case, I can get you more detail, but it's essentially once you stop seeing these 99999s all in a row, you kind of just order them by largest to smallest rather than setting a regular threshold.
What's the top 300? What's the definition to get to the top 300?
Top 300 of what?
The last bullet. The show no discrepancy between billed and unbilled, which is approximately the top 300 accounts with the highest discrepancy. How many are there?
Yeah.
Is there only 300, or is those what's the threshold that makes them show up as a outlier?
I believe we chose 300 because that's when Steph felt that's the outliers went away. And if we continue to see outliers, we would have kept adjusting them. We wouldn't have just left hundreds of outliers.
What's the definition that makes them an outlier? 100% increase, 25% increase?
That's not how we viewed it for this analysis. We looked at it, and when you go from something like 500 gallons a month to nearly 1 million gallons a month, that's what we decided.
So there were 300 accounts.
In what we're saying is basically we went down the list and we saw, we might have gotten to 250, 275 before we stopped seeing these 999 repeating type numbers. And then we went down to 300 just to make sure, because again, we're trying to kind of come up with a total number. And we can get you a more detailed response on how many.
I just want to theoretically understand.
What about the read files? Could the read files be shared?
I don't know. That might be a data privacy issue. Just because it has individuals' accounts and.
Yeah, Mr. Davis. Yeah, they do have their account, the customer's account number, their address.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And as it was pointed out in the code of conduct, we will have access to confidential information. I would also point out the committee's been shared resident name, address, account number, consumption history, meter reads last week. So I think this information should be able to be shared.
So normally when we do these sorts of things, that means kind of on these one-off chances, not handing over an entire city's every household and residence bill for the last 3 months. There's public safety issues with that because you can determine which homes are empty. If you have enough data, you can start to detect patterns on what time people are home.
We're all crackheads here. Can you download?
Well, I don't think that's a fair statement, and clearly not what I was saying.
Hey,
Is it
committee.
editable?
Yeah,
Can you take
that really wasn't helpful.
Can you
Hey,
take
Mr.
can you
Roach?
take the address off it?
Yeah.
Is that downloadable?
Committee, okay, committee, we've been anxiously waiting for this 3230 presentation for weeks now. Can we please get through Mr. Roche's presentation? Let's jot some notes down. We're going to have plenty of time to talk. Getting into a debate about a request for more data is not helpful right now.
All right, so at this point, we had a clean data set where we had treated the very minuscule percent that had a high read or a low read as determined by staff expertise on sort of what outliers are. Also, we're going to get into talking about, base rates and the different tiers. Just remember that in Pearland, the base rate is not a connection fee, right? In some cities, you have just you have this size meter. It's going to be $10 a month no matter what you use. Our base rate is a volumetric usage cost, right? So there is usage. Please keep that in mind. So this question came directly from the committee. What would the arrearage be with no base consumption and at the lowest tiered rate? So we worked through it as such. We took that clean data set and we backed out the water base and the sewer base charges for each month according to the account type. And we put a little snippet there. We did this for every account in the city. And an example is below. Here you can see we have 3,000 gallons. We call it a calculation, but it's subtraction. And you end up with 710 gallons of usage, 1,000 gallons. And so you ended up with that number of no base charge going forward in the total gallons for each account. One note is because of the way we're running this analysis is if someone has a very small usage and we go to take out that base rate, it can create sort of a negative number. This doesn't have anything to do with the negative reads we were talking about ago. It's just a figment of how we do things for this analysis. You can't have a negative consumption, so we set those as 0 consumptions for the purpose of this analysis. So next, we multiplied each account by the appropriate rate. This is what took us a little bit of time to set up and run and feel comfortable with. I'm sorry, it took a while to get back to the committee on these, but we really wanted to make sure it was working right. We did a lot of spot checking. So these, you have 2 different rate types or structures. You have inside the city rate, which we list there, and then we have outside the city rate. And then we went ahead and did the math, right? So we took the appropriate rate, we took the usage. These rates are all per 1,000 gallons. So you calculate the cost per gallon for each appropriate type, do some very simple calculation cost, and we come up with the total cost. We did this for every account across the city. Of course, we used kind of an automated way of doing things. My point in showing the math is just I want to be really transparent in how we did this so that we can talk about if you want to see it a different way or if this way makes sense to everybody. We're all on the same page.
So just make sure I understand, you've got basically what the unbilled consumption is by account now, based after this calculation.
With no base rate, yes. And I'm about to show we did it a second time, including the base rate with the normal tiers.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, wrong button. Okay, so then we ran this a second time because we knew you all would want to have the full amount, including those base rates, including that tiered usage, right? So I'm not going to belabor this one as much. It's the same idea. But we applied the public water and sewer rates to the consumption, separating out the base and then adding the gallons and, for tier 1 and the gallons for tier 2. We then summed the base charge and the tier charges to get the final amount that we're behind on. And then just another reminder that that base rate is not a connection fee. It's part of that volumetric usage.
This is Seth Garrison from Rough-Tellis. Let me just jump in on that point right there.
Yes, please.
The base charge and the base consumption is not volumetric. What it is a allowance that comes along with the base rate. So it's really more accurately described as an allowance that comes with the base charge. But base charge obviously is a fixed fee that's related to meter charge that goes. So the tiers really only apply to the volumetric piece. So I would characterize that base charge more as an allowance that comes with that base rate.
That's fair. And that's why we have you on the call. I'm still learning the utility bill side of things, and we're glad you're here to clarify for us.
Yeah, it's a minor point, but I just thought I would jump in and say that because I think with the terminology, obviously, it can become very confusing to folks.
Yes. So providing a sample of how we did this, or an example, if you had a 5/8 inch meter and a monthly consumption of 3,000 gallons, this kind of works through the math in a more compact form. So your total unbilled charge would be $46.40. So this is coming up on the tables that you've been asking to see. The top one is going to be the total arrearage with the base in the tiers. The bottom one is going to be that amount with no base in the lowest tiers. So when we measure this, we're at 7.7 million. These numbers down here in the bottom right are really kind of the most important takeaways. But of course, we're going to provide it by account type, by base, by volumetric, the total just for water, the total just for sewer, et cetera. So there's a lot to take away here. And I apologize. I don't like showing this much information on the slide. I know it can be too much, but as a reference document, I think this will be helpful to the committee because you can go back to this. So we had that 7.7 million with the base charges and with the tiered rates. And then without it, we came to 3.9 million. And if you remember, Rough-Tellis's number was about 5 million or so. So this is where we expected to end up. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the difference in methodology between Rough-Tellis's number and ours, just because, the committee, you're probably feeling like we have these two numbers. How did, $2 million, where did this come from? So in Rough-Tellis, please chime in if I get anything wrong. Rough-Tellis ran this number a little while ago using data provided back in October through November. And what they did is they calculated the average monthly billing amount for each account, and then they did that for each type of service line size. And then they subtracted the monthly base charges from this amount so that the average monthly amount paid for consumption alone. This amount was then divided by 30 to generate an estimated daily consumption charge. So this is from their report estimating, the daily consumption charge over here. And then they kind of worked from there to get to, the total amounts by meter size and things like that. Also, one of the other things that is different is, they use that average amount and we use the actual gap because we have that sort of data, and we were able to work we were able to get it working and figure out how to do it. The Rough-Tellis data also was lagging about 58.25 days is what the gap was between reading and billing at that time. When we did our calculations, right, time had gone by, so our gap was a little bit smaller. So that's why these numbers can shift. There's a third really, really important piece, whether you're looking at Rough-Tellis's 4.9 number or 7.7 number or 3.9 number. And this is key. If you remember nothing else, I hope you remember this. This number changes, right? Because we have this 2-month window that's getting smaller by 2 days every single time we go through a billing cycle, but it kind of follows us through the seasons. And water usage is really driven by weather events to a large extent. So if you are measuring these in our really low months, low usage months in the winter, like we are now, that total arrearage dollars might show up as being low. Whereas if you are, then you slide into summer and it gets hot and people are using a lot more water, the total amount in arrears can actually go up, even though you've made progress on closing that gap between when we read and when we bill. So please know that it's not that these numbers are always going down. They're just kind of snapshots in time, and they're very seasonal. They're very weather driven, whether it's a dry summer or a wet summer. And that, the way you calculate these things, Raf Tellis had a great method. We came up with a different method that we hope provides clarity and kind of provided some more information to the committee.
Can I ask a question in regards to that?
Yes, sir.
The question I have is given that it is seasonal based upon the unbilled consumption, when would be the optimum time to close the gap? When is it at minimum? When is it at minimum?
It would be at minimum. So you would take whatever your gap is at the time. So if 2 months, and then you would go like 2 months out from that, right? So in winter time is when you'd want that 2-month window to be. If you're talking a year from now, that window would be significantly smaller. So you'd want to portion it for like January or something like that, I would guess.
So my question, my question, I guess I got is right now, and I'm just thinking because we're just coming out of basically winter, we're getting ready to hit spring and the heat. If we're going to make a move, now would be the time. Am I missing something?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more to that. Just because we are already moving along, this water's already been consumed, and it's also a part of the budget for this year. And as we're getting into next year's budget planning process, so we've got some steps to get you all updated information, which I'll talk about at the end to help you give us the best guidance possible, because this information is a snapshot in time, and you all need to have information about sort of what the future looks like and what those projections are as well.
Okay.
Can I just jump in here quickly? And this is why I do not like the term arrears to be used, because as you can see from this calculation, depending on what time you make the calculation, the amount of money changes. So it's not a fixed amount of money that is, potentially owed. It's a variable amount of money based on the number of days outstanding.
Yeah.
So, that has a profound impact on, how much you would have to relieve out of the books, I guess, if you were to get rid of this amount.
Well, my only question is that given, and Raf Tillis hadn't been on the other meetings, but the emphasis trying to get current so that we can deal with this problem with the high bills and automated data transfers. The point I just am making is that if we delay to make a decision to close the gap or whatever else we're going to recommend, and we do that in the summer, that amount is way higher. And the point of it is that we're really at a point right now that if you're going to make a decision to close the gap, you got to do it, almost immediately is my point. And otherwise you're going to have to wait again till December, January, February, somewhere in there to do it again to minimize what that unbilled consumption is.
Well, again, let me just, this is, if you were to write off any time during the year this consumption, you're not writing off a physical amount. You're just simply writing off an amount of unbilled usage, basically.
Yeah.
I understand, and I'm not necessarily proposing it right off. There's a whole nother, there's several other options, but
yes.
Right. I understand.
Yeah. Now to frame it, and I'll be very brief on this, to frame it, this month, my cycle 12 will have February and March meter reads unbilled. Those are more likely, even though 4 months from now in July, you'll be 8 days closer because you're gaining 2 days every month. But the amount of water I'm using at that time from May to July is probably going to be a whole lot more than what I've used now. So to Mr. King's point, in terms of the amount that's outstanding, this is probably going to be the smallest unbilled consumption volume for 2 meter reads that you'll see.
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement.
Okay, keep moving.
So,
Good. Thank you.
Mr. Roach.
Okay, good discussion. So just wanted to, these are just some recap questions. What's the difference between Reptelis's number and the 7.7 million number staff came up with? If you, the full number, largely due to one method used average yearly consumption. So you don't have that seasonality in play, it just kind of averages out. And whereas staff used, the actual amounts we had based off the snapshot that we were calculating for. So kind of two different purposes there that generates two different numbers.
One question to Raftelis.
Yes, sir.
Raftelis, did your 5 million number include base charges?
No, it did not.
Okay, so that's a significant difference because I think I saw base charges are what, couple million? Okay,
yeah.
so base charges are $3.7 million. So that actually would put this one below if you back out. Now, Seth, did y'all include sewer charges or were you only looking at water?
We were just looking at these water charges right here.
Okay, no sewer? Okay, perfect. I think that's appropriate. We'll get into that later though. Continue, Mr. Roach.
Thank you. All right. Question kicking around internally is, well, what should this normally be? What's a normal figure? What's a best practice figure? Unfortunately, there isn't really a best practice figure that exists that I could find. If you all know of one, be happy to take a look at it from AWWA or something like that. Mostly because the dollar size is going to be different based on every community. In their size, it's going to be based on weather patterns. It's going to be based on when you're measuring it. So that's why staff have been focusing on kind of the days, the count of the days, and closing that gap in days rather than closing the gap in terms of dollars.
Hey, Eric.
Yes, Mayor.
What really brought that about was internal to the audit committee. We raised that question, and it wasn't necessarily meant to be anything formal, other than if you go back and look at the arrearage numbers that were put into the memo, you'll have an arrearage number at the end of September in 16 and in 17. And then you see that number jump in 18 as that was already the start of probably, the arrearage numbers that were growing. But if you look in 17, it was just shy of $2 million, 1.9 and some change. And so that's what brought the question about what would be approximately, a 10 to 15 day normal billing gap, which is just normal. What should that be given our size? And again, I don't know if we have a right number or wrong number, and it's going to move throughout the year as demand, goes through peaks and valleys, but didn't know so in other words, when I look at that 7.7 number, is 2 million or 2.3 or 2.5, is that the kind of appropriate number? So really what's still outstanding through the gap is, call it $5 million or some number like that. That's what brought this question about.
Yeah.
Let me just jump in quickly on this one. So again, I'm going to point out the use of the word arrearage, because really this is the billing gap period, which is different than arrears. AWWA does track delinquent accounts, and that's really what you're looking at for arrearage, 30, 60, 90 days due. I guess the reason there is no standard associated with this is because there's a lot of folks still billing quarterly. There's people that bill, every other month. So the billing gap tends to be all over the place with these folks. And obviously it depends on whether you're reading with the drive-by system like the city currently has, AMI, or doing manual reads. There's still a lot of communities that are manual reading as well too. So 7 to 15 days is about reasonable for Pearland.
Yeah. So let me rephrase it based on our committee audit committee meeting just a little while ago. One of the things that we asked for in the audit is to go ahead and define number one, the unbilled amount. Okay, we're not using the word arrears. We're not using any. It's the gap. It's the unbilled amount. And then we know there is a billed amount, but we just haven't received it yet. And that's a normal operating, number. So we've asked the auditors to define in the audit what is billed yet hasn't been collected, and then what is the unbilled amount. And maybe we ought to start using those terms since that's what we've asked to be, used in the audit. So something of that nature.
And just to stay on track for just a minute on terms of a 10, 15-day gap discussion, if you're on AMR and you've got a 40-day data limit, given the customer 30 days to respond to a potential bill says that should be roughly 10, just as an observation, right?
Great points, everyone.
Thanks. To the mayor's point, Mayor Cole, I think you're saying we need to differentiate between unbilled meter reads and accounts receivable. That's really what you're talking about. The other number was the accounts receivable. What's that haven't been paid. So unbilled meter reads, accounts receivable.
That's probably the right way to put it, Jimmy. And one of the things that like I said, we had this discussion about an hour ago in our audit committee meeting, because the audit will be presented to council next week. And so, and in that number, instead of having this big number and all of this lumped into it, let's go ahead and break it out. And in fact, the auditors said that most cities, break this stuff out anyway. So let's go ahead and define it, break it out. And so it's should be fairly clear when people look at it.
All right. I think something that had come up previously at the committee is, are there any costs associated with this, whether it's 7.7 or 5.5 or 3.9? What does it cost the city? And the answer is it hasn't cost the city anything, right? It's just delayed revenue coming in at this point. It's currently 2 months in arrears. If it was like 2 or 3 years in arrears, I think we'd be getting worried about people who have, not paid on an account in 3 years. And are we really going to collect that? But 2 months in arrears isn't the same as 3 years. So we expect and we're projecting to calculate the normal amount of revenue that we would normally get off is when we send a bill out this month. If we get 98% of it back immediately, that's what we're planning on getting back from the 7.7 million. The other part of this is, is that 7.7 million, if it had gone to fund balance, would it have generated any sort of investment returns or interest returns? And the answer is not really. It would have been pretty negligible. This is due to the really low interest rate environment we're in now, really low market returns. And Kristen can step in and speak up if I'm wrong here, but cities are usually restricted in how we can invest our funds. We can't invest really aggressively and get like an 8 or 9% return. So just because the stock market has skyrocketed doesn't really mean the city's investments have skyrocketed either. So, right now the 7.7 million hasn't cost residents anything. It hasn't cost the city anything. It's just delay in when that revenue is going to come in.
Mr. Roach?
Yes.
Does the city know what their cost to carry cash is?
I think, is Kristen on?
I am.
Is that something we can get for the committee or calculate?
I don't know. That is not my area of expertise. That may be something maybe our financial advisor could look into, Mr. Roebuck.
It was cost to carry cash.
Yes,
Okay.
cost to carry cash, cash carrying cost. He should understand.
And then staying on just carry with Jimmy's discussion just a minute. So, you paid money and you had cash outgo to generate that water, provide that water. And then you've got that cash lost income on that amount and then you've got the delayed carry cash cost for the unbilled amount for the period of 2 months roughly. Now, yes, it's your return is 1% less, maybe a little more. I'm not sure what your accounts are, but the point is that is a fraction of some amount of that 7.7. It's a small, but when you go to the level of 300 accounts that are high or low and you're balancing the accounts, that's just another dot on the I. But the point is there is some lost carry cash costs that is it has to be accounted for in the balance sheet. That's all. I'm good. Keep moving.
Okay. We've been asking, has the city ever borrowed money because of this? The answer is no. The city's growth, the relatively small amount, that 2-month window, and the fact that the fund has had a healthy fund balance for the last several years have made it so that we did not need to take any sort of loan out to pay for this or borrow from other funds or anything like that. So nothing like that's occurred. And to be honest, it hasn't been a discussion. We don't plan on it happening. So this gets back to the memo that had gone out that talked about sort of what the future looks like and the future of that enterprise fund. And this is sort of looking at more than just one budget year. How do we think we're trending this year? It's what is coming down the pipeline that needs to be paid for. And one of the things I highlighted is that the multi-year forecast, which is put together by Ralph Tellis, has sort of what we colloquially call the fund balance, but because it's an enterprise fund, it's labeled as cash equivalents. Those cash equivalents you see are being drawn down from year to year. For a while, they were building up and now they're being drawn down. This is to pay for the capital projects that are already ongoing, so like a water plant. And the way these show up in the budget is they show up as a transfer to the water sewer debt fund, which is where we pay our enterprise debt out of. If you want to see what I'm talking about, you can go to the FY21 adopted budget, go to the multi-year forecast and look at page 43, and you can follow these directions to find the line. And what this does is it helps us inform the discussion on how much flexibility is in the fund today, not just for the end of the year where we have this large fund balance, but also taking into account that, like, hey, we have debt payments coming up that are higher in out years, or we expect other things to happen in out years, and build in those assumptions to make sure that we're planning for the long term. So the second side of this coin is, I assume this would come up, so I thought I'd answer it, is what revenue increases are assumed in that multi-year forecast. We list revenue as well as expenses over the next couple of years. So this multi-year forecast was built around the following revenue increases. Just a reminder that FY21 was actually a 0% increase as adopted by the City Council. FY22 is planned to have a 17% revenue increase. So these include things like growth in the community, new accounts. It includes things, so it's like things like new accounts, or if, these numbers can change depending on the weather and things like that as well.
Rate increase?
Yeah, a rate increase would be a portion of that. I think, what I'm trying to get across is that not all of this 17% would necessarily be a rate increase. There's other offsetting factors at play that can get us to that 17.3%. Does that make sense?
So is that 17.3% we got to have this much money, and if we don't get it through increased consumption and more accounts, we're going to get there one way or another? So if that accounts for 14%, then the rate increase only has to cover 3.3. But if we see 7% in all this growth, then you got to come up with 10% in a rate increase.
So I'm going to throw that to Raftelis in a second, if they can respond to those numbers and kind of what they mean and how to interpret them. I would also say that fund balance that we've had traditionally, where you might see like $30 million, $20 million in fund balance, we can and have used that in the past to go from, let's say, if we needed a 15% increase, no, let's just eat some fund balance and go down to 10% rate increase or a 2% rate increase or whatever it might be. So those fund balance dollars can be used to keep future rate increases or other costs down. Go ahead, Raftelis.
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, this is simply a projection of what revenue will be needed in the upcoming year based on what you have projected for capital expenses and based on what you have outlined you want to maintain for a fund balance. And again, just reiterating what you said, Eric, that can come from rate increases. It can come from increases in growth of the system. It can come from increases in consumption. There's a lot of places that can come from.
Go ahead, Mr. Davis.
That's the question. So is that 17.3%? That's just we would like to see 17.3% more revenue, but if we don't see 17.3% more, it may be okay.
I wouldn't characterize it as that. I would say based on your capital requirements that you've laid out, what you plan to spend for expenses, what your historical consumption has been, it's projected that you'll need a 17.3% rate increase in order to meet your reserve targets and what you want to have for fund balances.
And I would also add that the reason I bring this up is, that 7.7 figure that we were talking about earlier is assumed to be coming in. So one of the things that it can affect, right, is fund balance and how much we're able to offset rates by. So these things are all interlinked. It's really important that you all knew this and that it can be found in the multi-year forecast section of the budget, which you haven't taken a look at. It's page 43. I'd be just a snippet of that as a PDF if that would be helpful, so you don't have to look through a 282-page document to find it.
Can you send us the link to the document? Because when I went to the transparency city website, transparency financial reports, we don't have a budget up there. So
yeah, I think it's just that the budget is just hard to find right now. And I'm sorry, I think I can improve this, and I think I know how. When you go to the finance department and you click budget, you should be able to view all the previous years, and the FY20 to 21 budget should be there. So I just dropped a direct link to this year's budget PDF, and then that second link is a link to where all of the budgets that have been adopted are listed out.
And Eric, maybe you can give folks a little bit of a tour. I'm guessing that most of the increase that's required is for capital, to pay for capital that's being added. I can't imagine there's a huge increase in expenses that would constitute a bulk of that.
Sure. Can you all see the budget document that I have up?
Yes.
Okay. So if you want to find what I'm talking about, you just open the document, scroll down a few pages to the table of contents, and then you see this multi-year forecast section. And what we're talking about is this water and sewer fund. So if you click that, this first page covers different revenue types and transfers and those sorts of things. The second page is where most of the useful information is. So I'm going to zoom in to make this a little bit easier.
Is that book 1 or book 2?
This would be so we don't do a book 2 for the adopted budget. We only do that for the proposed budget. So book 1, there's only one adopted budget book. So as you can see here, we have actuals in here from 2019 because that's the data available when we put this document together. Projected out 2020. We have the adopted budget for 2021. That's the year we're currently in. And then we forecast 22 and 23. And this is what comes from Raftellus. And, you can look at the line items and kind of see that, administration is more kind of hovering around 900,000, maybe $1 million. Lift stations, pretty much flat. I'm just generalizing here. Wastewater's relatively flat. If I draw your attention down to this line item, transfers to the water sewer debt fund, we go from 23 million this year to 29 million this next year and 36 million in 2023. These numbers are fairly predictable because this represents, loans and things like that the city has agreed to. We know how much they're going to cost, and they're unfortunately to people like me who do budget, they're not very flexible, right? You got to pay your debt. So this is the line that's mostly driving these total expenditure numbers over the next few years. And in turn, these total expenditure numbers are using that fund balance, and we're drawing down that fund balance because it makes sense. You don't, as a utility, want to just endlessly accrue money, right? It's not a profit-making venture. So we're using that fund balance to pay this, to help pay these bills. And you can see that here. And again, remember that the beginning of cash equivalents is basically that fund balance. And you can see we're drawing it down. Now there's a certain amount that we try and keep. And I say try, but it's actually really, really important when it comes to the enterprise fund. So we require a bond coverage ratio of 1.4. And you can see here that, previously when we had really high reserves, and revenues, it was good. We're projecting in FY22 that we're going to be at 1.4, which is, the bare minimum standard we try and keep. We also look at the cash reserve ratio. We have a 25% minimum requirement. And, out in FY23, we are projecting we're going to be right at those. So this is, this is when you ask me like how much flexibility is in the fund in future years. These are the numbers I'm looking at, is how can we continue to meet 1.4 and 25% and, keep the fund healthy, because this fund balance, when emergencies hit, this is where we go for cash. This is the rainy day fund. And if we can use it to pay off debt, if we can use it to offset revenue increases, we do. It doesn't ever get transferred outside of the water and sewer enterprise system, right? We're not using this to pave roads or anything like that. But at the same time, we need to keep certain amounts in there to keep our creditors happy, to keep Raftellus happy. I see Seth over there nodding. And also, just for those rainy day freak events, hurricanes, things like that, where you might need $20 million all of a sudden to fix a water plant the next day.
Mr. Roach, got
Yes,
a
sir.
question. Can you scroll up to the previous page where you have the revenues?
Yes, sir.
2022 forecasted revenue, 56.29 million. That's 18% more than 2021. And looking at the trend, biggest jump I see 2020 was, $1.1 million. 2021's down. Are we projecting a big rate increase there?
To be honest, it's too early to talk about rate increases. And I'm not saying that we can't talk about it.
Okay.
I'm saying it because I haven't really started calculating those numbers. The city hasn't calculating those numbers. Our financial advisors. What I can say is rate increases are a part of making sure that we bring in enough revenue to pay for those known expenditures, right? And so go ahead.
I can ask though, 2022 revenues, in order to maintain the bond coverage of 1.4% that you have forecasted, you need $63 million to offset everything else. So one way or another, next year, your projections, just to meet our bond coverage, we've got to come up with an extra $8 million. Correct?
That's my understanding. And Seth, I don't know if you have a different take on it.
No, that's exactly right. And if you go down to the other sheet, you'll see what the majority driver is the capital spending that you've had.
And just so you all know, where I pulled that 17.3% revenue change figure and 13.6% figure are from here.
So just to paraphrase just a minute, based upon the limitation of the 1.4 and the 25% min required, basically for the outliers going into 22, 23, you have very little flexibility.
So that's a great question. So this was, forecast at the time. This was put together probably, was it back in June, Seth, that we put this together?
I think in the spring some point. I don't remember the month.
Yeah. So, as we go forward, and you always want to forecast a little bit conservatively, just, that makes sense. You don't want to assume there's money coming forward. What we're actually proposing is that we come back to the committee with an updated forecast that gives you an additional fiscal year, uses the latest information available, right? Because this is the adopted budget, and we were doing it in the middle of COVID. There was a lot of questions around, might people stop paying bills? And, now that we're into the year, we know, the real estate market's thriving. People are still moving in. People are paying their bills pretty well. Let's get you a better number, because basing any decision off information that's outdated when we could get you better numbers doesn't make sense to me, at least.
Mr. Roach, when
Yes,
you
sir.
get us that, can you provide the current revenue budget performance report?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Thank you.
Well, my only comment, we'll get back onto the agenda here, but my only comment there is that given that the clock is ticking and we've got to make a decision and make recommendations to you quickly, because you need to be doing your budget.
Yep.
Right. And number two, if these aren't the current projected numbers, that, you need to get that updated to us literally before the next meeting, if you can.
So we'll talk about that on the last slide.
Okay.
Is everyone good?
Let's get back to the slides then. Let's get back to the slides.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good, Eric. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Okay. Why do we have a fund balance, right? I talked about this. It's our rainy day fund. We can use it to pay for capital projects, offset rate increases. Can you transfer money to the enterprise fund from other funds? No. The only thing that you might see as a transfer in the budget is the city departments are paying their water bills via transfer to there. So it's not like we can tap the main taxpayer general fund to pay into this fund. There's sometimes you can use impact fee revenues to transfer to specific projects, but that's usually not a huge amount. You do, however, transfer money out of the general fund the other way or the enterprise fund into the general fund to pay for things like accounting services that might be provided by the general fund staff. So sometimes you see some charges to the enterprise fund for services provided. But in general, no, we don't give money to the enterprise fund. It's designed to be a self-sustaining system. There are some laws that allow for things like loans, but those require interest paid back to the general fund and things like that.
Hey, Mr. Roach, have we ever has the enterprise fund loaned money to the general fund? I thought I've seen a budget document somewhere where they did that and were expecting a couple $1 million back.
Where the enterprise fund loaned to the general fund?
Correct.
Not in my recollection, but part of that, unfortunately, that's kind of that institutional knowledge that walked out the door when John left. Kristen, do you know if we've done that recently? Made any interfund loans?
Not to my knowledge.
I can do some research, Mr. Davis.
I appreciate that. And if I can find a free moment, I may dig into it too. I know I saw something last year, document somewhere referencing the loan. So, but I'll see what I can find too. Thanks.
Sounds good. All right, so next steps. We're working to get you an updated multi-year fund projections. The best way to do this is to, again, have Raftellus do it. So we're working on a contract now, and this will both speed up how quickly we can get you these numbers, and it's having the experts calculate them the same way they've always been calculated, rather than having staff try and calculate them where we might accidentally do something different and the numbers don't match up. I think it makes sense to keep the methodology the same. And we're planning on having Raftellus come back and present what they find. I've been very clear in the instructions that, you know, I want them to come back with an honest third-party opinion on what the fund looks like in the future and be really transparent with how they got to those numbers. And, you know, if fund balance is drawn down, what effects does that have in the future? How much can fund balance be drawn down and what effects would that have? Those sorts of questions are what they're going to be working on. So to get at the dates, you know, it's pretty complicated because they have to update all the projections for the current year. They have to look at all the accounts and gallons that are billed and do a bunch of math there. Then they have to look at all the assumptions and new debt issuances that have been done and double cross all those T's and dot the I's. And then they can kind of come up with that forecast of where they think things will be. And then they'll have to analyze that and do kind of that sensitivity analysis around what happens if you take $1 million out or $1 million in, those sorts of things. So we think around the end of April. The contract hasn't been signed yet. So I can only kind of give you a round number there. But we're planning on having them come back to the committee and present it themselves. So you all can ask questions and it's not staff interpreting their numbers. And, you know, I think that'll give you the information you all need to make a decision. At least that's my hope.
From my perspective, I can tell you a month and a half from now is going to be a little too late. That's just my perspective. So y'all might be spending money on something that we may already be past it.
Is it so the budget calendar is actually part of what I can control, and from my perspective, having you all making a decision in a month and a half or 2 months, it is okay. It's not too late for me to incorporate into the budget. If there's other timelines driving it, I might not be aware of those.
Yeah, I'm thinking in a month and a half, we get that, we kick the can around, you know, mull it over for a couple more weeks. All the data we've now been given is out the window, so we got to have something new. So now you're at the end of May, and we're in June, you know, when you got a higher consumption. So from my perspective, I don't see it as that big. I actually think we might be able to have this resolved in the next week or two.
Yeah, and let's just talk about that a minute, Jimmy, and I want to tag team you. You know, from the standpoint, I think there's a few options, and we probably going to have another meeting just to discuss what those are. But, you know, write-off is one. Another one is pick a date. And I'm going to go with what Miss Massey made the comment literally 3-4 meetings ago. Could you adjust the base rate and decide I'm going to get back this unbilled consumption in pick a period a year and change the rates to completely do away with this problem and immediately within literally weeks move to current billing. And whatever that the unbilled consumption amount is, and you've given us more than enough data to make our decision on that. I mean, the rest of this is fine-tuned. So I think we've got what we need in order to make decisions. And then, or we just stick with what we're doing and take 2 days and go another 3 years at doing this. And I think everybody on the committee is probably not willing to do that. But my point is we can lay out what our options are, I think the numbers that you've given us are accurate enough to accomplish what we need to make a decision on. Just my opinion.
I think my open question is this, because I think you're right, Ralph and Jimmy. I think we've got several options in order to, if you will, recover necessary cash over the course of the next 2, 6, 12 months, right? But being able to calculate this down to an account level is important to keeping all those options open. So I think the real question is, do you think you're in a position to do that now, Eric, or do you think that you could get in that position within the next 4 to 6 weeks?
You know, the way we calculated it was outside of the normal software we would use, right, to run bills. We loved the idea. I think maybe Denise provided it, of just uploading the bills into a test environment and running them that way to get the total amounts for each account. And unfortunately, that didn't work out. So I would need to talk to Nancy and the UB team and kick it around. And I'm sorry, I don't have a great answer there.
You know, go ahead.
Could I ask, so maybe Ralph Tellis knows this even as well. So if we waited for the new numbers, just the best guess, what do you think that looks like? Are we looking at a significant difference? Do we go with what we have, knowing that there's a difference coming and it's a small variation, a few million? What's your best guess?
So I'll be honest, and then Seth can chime in. When I saw the 1.4 figure for the debt ratio and the cash reserve, percentage hitting that 25%, my read on it was that there's not a lot of flexibility in the fund of out years, and that we need those reserves to help pay for that capital debt in order to keep rates lower. Remember, it's kind of a closed system. The updated information may show something different, right? Because we're further along in the year, we have better information, we can project out further. Capital projects might have changed, things like that. So there's too many moving pieces for me to say like, oh, it would be 100,000 or a million. But I wouldn't be proposing that if I didn't think that it could swing that much. I think it's possible it could be 1 million in this direction or 1 million in another direction, or it could be nothing and be right on as projected. Seth, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I would guess it may even swing even more. I mean, I would be interested to see how actual consumption tracked with what projected consumption was, to see where we are there. Because obviously a couple $1 million in either direction is going to make a huge difference on the percentages.
Well, and so let me propose this as a path forward. Y'all go ahead and do that. And we're going to go ahead and proceed as if we got good sense and use the numbers you got, and recognizing there's probably some additional numbers we're going to need. But the total aggregate, I think, is probably good enough to make a directional. And then what we may be in a position to do is say, okay, well, let's get these numbers and then make the decision. And my point to make is that based on the lack of flexibility because of the capital costs, a straight out write-off doesn't look like it's very palatable, but we can have that discussion. But the point to make is there are other options on the table. There are other ways to deal with this that may not actually affect the numbers that much.
Yeah. Hey, Ralph, let's go ahead and get through this, because we're not going to be able to discuss all this today, and we're going to need to get our next meeting booked, and I'm going to have a little information, and
I agree with you, Jimmy. My point is, before we leave out of this, I think there's I've got some things that I would like them to provide for us for the next meeting, but let's go ahead.
Could I just ask one question real quick, Jim? Eric, so in one meeting, John dropped a couple of numbers. He said the last 2 years, so in 2019, there was 1.2 million upside on revenue and underspend on expenses 2 years in a row. And so where do we see that? Has that been earmarked? Has it been spent? Is it somewhere else? Can we wrap our head around that number as well?
So in past years, any extra revenue that wasn't spent or expenditures that didn't happen, that flows to that bottom line fund balance that we were talking about earlier. That's where it shows up.
So
And then,
that.
yeah, and then we keep track of it on a yearly basis or on a monthly basis to see how funds are performing and monitor, make sure things don't get out of line, normal financial stuff. And right now things look like they're performing as expected, no huge swings either way. It's a little complicated because the 3230 plan is, we're comparing it to previous base periods, of course, but yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So at least for the presentation, we'll go forward with our work with Reftelis. They're going to, regardless of whether you all need it for your decisions or not, they are going to be working with us on creating the next multi-year forecast for this fund and helping us with the rate model. So, that you can know that that'll be coming along anyway. If I don't think the time frame is a problem. I don't think it's costing the city anymore to have it, at the end of next month versus have it in 3 months. But that's something we'll talk to Reftelis about, and this are still kind of in the middle of those discussions. But that's kind of when I plan on having that information. And if you all are still meeting and would like access to it, of course we'll provide it. Other questions?
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. I'm sure we'll have questions. It's like Ralph said, when we go off and start thinking on our own, like we got good sense. So
there's a lot to digest here.
Absolutely.
Hey,
and this
Eric?
presentation will be out somewhere, right, Nance?
It sure will. We're gonna add that to the share drive for everyone, as well as Dara, let's go ahead and put that on the website since it's been recorded on the meeting here. So we'll put it there as well. And
you had a question? Okay, go ahead.
I do have something else too. The question came up from, I believe it was Mr. Davis. You asked the question about the meter reading files. I was able to get back with the legal department on that. Again, he stressed the information can be shared out. So I went ahead and loaded it on the share drive for y'all for the meter reading files that was used for the arrearage. Or excuse me, the unbilled amounts. Let me correct my statement too. Yeah, it's a Monday. It's a Monday. We've all missed an hour of sleep. So anyway, it's out there right now. I'm sending an email to y'all that it's I'm going to share it. Be sure again that it is confidential information. It is confidential information on there for y'all.
What's the file format?
The file format is Notepad.
It's a Notepad, so it's a dumb text file.
It's about what I understand it to be. Yes, sir. Tech savvy is not one of my strong points. That would be my doctoral daughter at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. Yeah.
Is it possible you to put that into an Excel file?
I don't know. You'll have to do that. I have no idea, sir.
We can do that.
Okay, I'm providing you. Yeah, thank you. I'm providing you guys with the raw data on there. Also, let me also, Mr. Davis.
Miss Massey, real quick, with that raw data, is that something we're asking to? So I'm a huge privacy advocate for residents. So I take that corner. Are we just asking the group to not share it publicly?
Correct. That's what Darren put down there as well. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and we're already under a code of conduct with privacy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
And Eric, you weren't on that meeting about the code of contact information that was on there. Yes. So I put that on as the caveat that we can't share this out to the public, but it can be shared with you all. Also, Mr. Davis, you gave a response back on the gentleman, or actually on the account that we talked about from the Facebook posting. And so I just wanted to inform, I agree with you. When we look at only 25 accounts, it does miss that one that was from like November, December when the customer had the first high bill. But we were able to catch it on the next one because they were within the parameter of reaching that one, within the 25 accounts on the high bill consumption usage. Going forward in March, staff is looking at 50, not just 25, but we're looking at 50 accounts now. Please note too that that's an increased workload that we've got here in this office, as well as for meter services as well. And then it also brought up a good point too, that, and I've also instructed team to do this too, that, you know, there's going to be times where what you've indicated that, you know, the phone call could be missed, or the voicemail might be missed by a customer, or whatever the case is. But we did try to make contact with the customer, as you know, to get that information to them on both months. So what I've asked staff to do is that when they don't get a hold of a customer, or the customer is requesting the information, we're going to go ahead on doing meter profiles. Now, me doing a meter profile is not just the utility billing department. It incorporates also meter services going out and ascertaining that meter profile. That information is brought back to our office. And then of course it creates that meter profile. We analyze it, as well as staff does manually put together a billing history for the customer as well. So, you know, where we show it in a chart by month and by year, so they can compare, you know, month over month, compare the month over month by year over year. So when they look at January's usage, they can look at January usage. If they've been here since, say, 2017, they can look at 2020, 2021, 2019, so forth, and see their usage during that time frame that's been billed to them. So we find that to be very beneficial for customers as well.
Okay.
So I just want to say thank you for bringing that up to my attention, and me sneezing through all this. I apologize.
Miss Massey,
Did
just
you say? Sorry, Ralph.
You had a question?
Did you say that staff attempted to contact them on both high reads?
No, just on the second one. Yes, sir. Because the first one, the first one, the customer didn't show up on it because the customer's usage went up by 28,500, and the 25th entry on that for the month was 32,500. So when we extend it out to 50 accounts, Now, also during that time frame, and it was also the holidays and that for those two billings, and so I can see that. And also, it's very possible that this particular customer may have never had a water bill in the past. They might have been at a location that they had a well or something. And the only reason I bring that up is that I have a family member that's in that situation now, that they're not realizing how much water they're going through on that. So I just throw that out as a possibility as well.
Thank you.
Is there any questions on that, y'all?
I just wanted to compliment Miss Massey for your reactions. It's a good step in the right direction to try to build back some of the challenges we have.
Absolutely. You know, it is. I agree. Thank you, Mr. King. And I do agree with you. It is a team effort that we're striving to do here. And it is a different of management style that this team has had in the past. So next month will mark 1 year that I've been in Pearland. So I actually have been, more or less, I have enjoyed this. This has been an interesting part of my career. So I appreciate the interaction that you guys bring forth on this too, because I've never had that kind of interaction with council and committee members and with you. So thank you all.
So just going back, let's see if we've got anybody else got any comments before we get to our additional questions that we might want to have them to answer.
We just hit 6 o'clock, so let's move it quickly.
If I could, can I add something to it? Mr. King, you brought into something I remember as well. Did you want to move forward on those Badger questions, or are you still waiting on that, sir?
Let's hold them still.
Okay.
We have, you know, I think we want to have an internal discussion meeting with meter and with engineering before we go do that.
Okay, so just let me know where you need to stand on that. So going forward, so I can, you know, do whatever you need to get done on that.
We're spinning many plates in the air, right? So
yes, you are.
Okay. Is there any other questions?
Today's presentation impacts that, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to put that plate up there too.
If there aren't any other questions, I'd like to go back, since we have enough to vote on the minutes now for the last 2 meetings. Has everyone reviewed and have any input on the 2 meetings from the 8th and the 11th? Was that it?
Yes, ma'am. 8th and the 11th meetings.
Okay. Any questions? All right. Does anybody want to present them for a vote? Do I get a motion?
So moved, Denise.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you very much.
Who
How are
seconded?
we doing this now, Jimmy? You guys, how are we voting? I missed the last meeting.
Just show of hands is fine.
Okay, well, that would mean everybody
Ayes
needs to
and
turn their
nays.
cameras on. Okay. Are we gonna do a roll call? You want me to do a roll call on this?
No, we don't need a roll call for minutes approval.
Okay. All right, so all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, so be it, accepted. Anything you want to cover, Steve?
Nope, I appreciate the presentation. This was a lot of content, making some progress. I think the last thing is really to talk about scheduling of the next meeting.
Correct.
Can I move back to the presentation minute?
1 minute, 30 seconds.
I just have some things I'd like you to run for the next meeting. What's the average on those accounts? What's the average unbilled consumption? Number 2, if we choose to drive a stake in the ground at the end of April, based upon that unbilled amount projected, what would the base water consumption rate have to be changed in order to recoup that unbilled consumption in 1 year and in 2 years?
I'm sorry. Can you say that one more time?
If we decide to drive the stake in the ground and say we're going to freeze the unbilled consumption at the end of April, what would be the amount of the base charge? Let's just do it in a base charge rate. What would be the difference in increase in rate for the base charge for a 1 year recovery and a 2 year recovery?
Eric, are you taking those actions?
Yeah.
Where I'm at is that right now you're picking up 2 days and we're taking 3 years to get there, and we're not able to get us to current billing. And if you go and you look at if everybody uses their normal usages, their normal rates, recognize there's a tiered system, but in the base rate, everybody gets a base rate. What would that base rate have to be in order to recoup that 2 months worth of unbilled consumption? And everybody gets paid, and it's a wash. I just move money from one pocket to another. It's still coming out at some point. But the point is it makes it pretty simple.
Ralph, the person that has nothing more than unbilled consumption is zero. It would change for every account, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, think about that. Yeah.
Everybody would have rearage or unbilled.
Can I throw out a possibility if you want to think about this too? If like I was indicating, Mr. King, you brought it up, you can look at the total amount that's unbilled and look at the amount and should think about changing the rates for just that one bill. For that one bill to incorporate the higher usage and the higher number of days being billed. And we can look at that type of tiered basis on that if we need to, that type of look. The customers would be billed only that one base rate. And this is something that can be done in the system itself without any kind of special, workaround, which is great. And then look at the fact that if it is 57 days, consider doing another suspension of late fees like we're doing right now for the freeze that we're doing right now. We did the suspension of late fees. We're also doing the suspension of shutoffs. Do that for that period of time as well. And then once we bill everybody that one-time billing, then we can go back to the original rates that were there prior to 3230 until we look at a difference in our rate changes or what our rate schedule would have to be done maybe in fiscal 2022.
Well, you're tag teaming exactly what I'm trying to figure out. What's the best way to deal with this? Yes.
Can you bring that as an example?
The point is this. Come back with the plan and what the numbers are. Right?
Okay. Let
Can you
me,
bring an example, Nancy?
yeah, let me work up the information that we have currently based off of what the figures are that, you know, Mr. Roach has worked on and the unbilled amount. And let me work with Ref Tillis because they work on our rate structure, and let's see what we can work on with that.
Miss-
Okay?
Hey, Miss Massey.
Yes,
Can
sir.
you also look at, they used actual meter reads, and I'll go back and review the file, but with the change that we're doing because of the freeze, some of those meter reads in February are going to be different than what we're actually planning to bill, right? Didn't council say use
Yeah, we've
last?
already got that. Mm-hmm.
All right, so whatever number Eric has might not be correct because we're using last year's number.
Correct. So we need to look at the most current information that we have out there on unbilled amounts, what we have. And then you're right, because we don't want to bill people who dripped their faucets and had water main breaks in February. You know, we don't want to do that. And I see Eric shaking his head yeah. So we don't want to use that. We want to use the data that we're going to bill those customers at and look at that. So it's going to take me some thought process now to go through this. Thank you to the lovely winter freeze of February 15th week. And may we not hear sleep fall again for a long time. But yeah, let me work up something on that, y'all. I don't have a complete idea on it just yet, but I have a theory on it. So let me go ahead and work that up, and I'd like to present that to y'all. And I appreciate Mr. King's opportunity on that, sir.
Yeah, I think we just got to get a path out of the woods that gets us current to billing. That's the big goal. And recognizing the numbers that y'all presented doesn't provide us a lot of financial flexibility. So the reality of it is we're going to have to recoup this unbilled consumption one way or the other. But let's do it in a way that gets the billing current, if
Absolutely.
we can.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And in the least workaround way possible, you know.
The easiest way you know how to do it.
Like how you think. Thank you,
Less
sir.
work. Keep it simple, right?
Simple.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Next meeting.
Next meeting.
That's it. Well,
Thursday.
council meets on the 22nd. That's Monday. So do we look at the Thursday, the 25th?
Oh, I was thinking about this Thursday.
We decided we were taking Thursday off because of spring break.
We're taking the 18th off. Okay. So
It was,
25th. Yeah.
Does that work?
Mm-hmm.
Sticking with our Monday,
And-
Thursday thing?
Yeah. And Denise, on that agenda, I'm going to have a presentation about the arrear amount. So if y'all can
Okay, so let's
get something in
talk.
there.
We can talk about that offline. Okay. We'll figure out how much time you need.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? All right. Hearing none. 6:09. So long. Appreciate everybody's attendance.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you Thursday.
Bye, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everybody.